Good afternoon. This is Darren Clable, the South Dakota State Fire Meteorologist, presenting the summer of 2023 South Dakota Wildland Fire Potential Outlook. Today is June 13th, 2023, so this outlook will really cover now through, say, the end of September into early October. We'll take a look at the wildfire climatology, then again we'll look at some forecasted conditions, and we'll end up on the overall potential for our state. Much of this presentation is going to be focused on western South Dakota, inclusive of the Black Hills. Remember that wildfire risk is environmental potential plus ignition potential. This presentation is really going to be focused on the environmental potential, or the climatic side of things. I can't necessarily forecast ignition potential, whether it be human caused or lightning caused. So really this is, again, overall environmental potential. We could have all the potential in the world. It could be extremely dry out there, but if we don't get a start, we're not going to have big fires. So kind of a busy chart here, but on the upper left is northwestern South Dakota. On the lower right is southeastern South Dakota. On the left center is the Black Hills. So this is kind of an outlay, if you will, of the 9 sections of South Dakota. On the left-hand side of each graph, and I'll stick with the northwestern climate division, is the area burned, and that's in hectares, over about a 30-year period. On the bottom is the month, January through December, and on the right-hand side is the number of fires. Now, the number of fires will be read by the line graph, while the total area burned will be read by the bar graphs, and it's kind of split up between total area and lightning area. The big thing I want to show, though, is everywhere across western South Dakota, whether that be the Northwest, the Black Hills, or the Southwest, our fire season really peaks in the summer months, July, August, September. Right? Contrast that with the eastern side of the state, where their fire season is really peaking in the spring months. Now, granted, the area burned, the left-hand axis on each of these, is different for each of these charts. We burn a lot more acreage in western South Dakota than we do in eastern South Dakota. But regardless, the focus for this presentation is really going to be on western and even central South Dakota. It seems like central South Dakota mostly peaks in the late summer to fall months, whereas western South Dakota peaks more midsummer. And so when I'm talking about wildfire seasonality or historical wildfire seasonality, it's different across the state, and we are just entering into our prime fire season for western South Dakota. Once we get to later this summer, it'll be prime fire season for central South Dakota. Eastern South Dakota, we're over the hump already. So again, a zoom up to this, and let's focus on the Black Hills for a second. Really, it's the months of July and August where we see the most wildfire starts and we see the most area burned. And of course, in the months of June, July, August, and September, in the Black Hills, more than 50% of our wildfires are caused by lightning. What are we looking for in terms of climatic drivers when it comes to our summer fire season within the Black Hills? And this is really inclusive of the broader western South Dakota. Well, in June and July, drought is key. We have to have drought because these are 2 of our wettest months of the year. So if we take a year, say 2012, where we had significant drought conditions, that really tilts the scales towards enhancing the fire potential. Take a year like this year, so far across western South Dakota, there is some limited drought, some abnormally dry conditions, but we've been seeing decent precipitation over the past couple of weeks. It's kind of bringing us out of that drought situation. Other things we see in June and July that might lead to big fires within June and July is those above average temperatures, and then short and long-term precipitation deficits. And so far in June, we're really not seeing any of those things in western South Dakota. We'll have to see what July brings. But August, really, drought's not too much of a factor there. And that's really because as long as you have short-term precipitation deficits, that means that you've lost out on precip in maybe June and July, which are 2 of our wettest months. And the grasses now, the farm fields, the herbaceous fields are feeling stressed, and they might be more susceptible to being burned. And so these are the things I'm really going to be focusing on, I guess, for the duration of this presentation. Over the past 12 months, we have seen some dry conditions across South Dakota. Eastern South Dakota, pretty dry, and that's kind of where the drought conditions are more existing. Western South Dakota, it's been on either side of average, maybe a tilt to a little bit below average. Again, the warmer colors here are below average precipitation. The cooler colors are above average precipitation on this map. Much of the Great Plains has seen below average precipitation over the past 12 months. Year to date, our percent of normal precipitation on the left, departure from normal precipitation on the right. And I will point you to South Dakota right in there. And we can see that eastern South Dakota has been pretty dry. Western South Dakota has been either side of average. And what do I mean by pretty dry year to date on the eastern side of the state? Well, we're looking at anywhere from maybe 2 to 6 inches below average in terms of year-to-date precipitation. And that's significant. That's like, 30 to 50% of the annual average precip. So they're really drying out on the eastern side of the state. But again, I want to stress that June, July, and August aren't big fire months for the eastern side of the state anyway. Temperatures year to date, largely cooler than average, although recently we have been seeing some warmer than average conditions. Here's our calculated soil moisture anomaly. The red colors indicate below average soil moistures. The green colors indicate above average soil moisture. And again, I just want to stress out that the eastern side of the state has seen kind of the worst effects of the drought. Of course, it's nowhere near the drought that east central Nebraska is seeing, or even down into Kansas. Western South Dakota is doing a little bit better. But of course, dry soils can really lead to higher evapotranspiration rates, higher evaporation rates, and really kind of stress out the plants that are trying to grow on the landscape. Here's our current U.S. drought monitor in the bigger image and where we were at with respect to the drought monitor last year at this time. And we can see that western South Dakota had some drought last year at this time. We still have some limited drought in the very southwestern corner of the state, but most of our drought's really limited to the southeastern corner of South Dakota. We do have those yellows or those abnormally dry conditions, across a much broader part of the state, but those abnormally dry conditions are not officially considered drought. Here's our 52-week change. So this is where we are today, it's really last week with respect to where we were 52 weeks ago. We had a lot of drought improvement across western South Dakota, 1 to 3 class improvements within the U.S. drought monitor, and then degradations across the eastern side of the state. So it's really a West River versus East River thing going on across South Dakota. I do want to direct your attention to the broader western part of the United States. Wow, significant improvements in the drought classes, and that was just due to a very, very wet winter, high snowpack kind of everywhere. I do want to point out our energy release components, and this is just for the Black Hills. Here is the northern Black Hills on the left and the southern Black Hills on the right. Back in April, and so this is January 1st on the left, December 31st on the right for both maps. The blue is the current year, 2023. The red is the period maximum for each day, and the gray is the average for the period. And so I do want to point out that back in April, when we had that 4 to 5 week stretch of really dry weather, we were showing kind of daily record maximums in our ERCs. But since we've had kind of a more wet period over the past 30 days, our ERCs now are actually below average Black Hills wide. So, that's it's not unexpected this time of the year because it's our wettest time of the year, but we have seen a lot more precipitation in the past few weeks. So let's take a look at the weather and drought outlook from the late spring going through the early fall. And of course, we only have 1 week left of spring before summer comes on June 21st. This is an ensemble forecast for July, August, and September. And so these are all different kind of climate model runs. NMME stands for the North. Well, now I can't remember what it stands for, so we'll just glaze by it. But each of these boxes kind of represents a different climate model and what they think the temperatures are going to be in the July, August, September timeframe. The warm colors indicate the model thinks above average temperatures, the bluish or cool colors below average temperatures, and by and large, all of these models are likely showing warmer than average conditions across the Midwest and the Great Plains, the upper Great Plains. The overall probabilistic forecast is right here showing higher than average probabilities of us seeing above average temperatures in July, August, and September. And of course, if we have above average temperatures, it's going to increase our evapotranspiration rates, pull moisture out of the soils, pull moisture out of the fuels, and dry things out quicker than otherwise would be expected. Same kind of a thing, but now this is for precipitation. Not seeing a strong signal one way or the other. The brown colors represent kind of a below average precipitation. The green colors an above average precipitation. Not a strong signal one way or the other. So, I'm leaning towards kind of an average summertime precipitation regime with above average temperatures in that July, August, September timeframe. The official Climate Prediction Center's outlook for that same time frame, they're showing above average temperatures for much of the continental United States, but I'm not sure. I have to go dig back in and see where this equal chances comes from across the northern Great Plains. And of course, they're saying equal chances of above average or below average precipitation during the same time frame. Our drought outlook, we do expect drought to persist, probably even expand across southeastern part of the state, just because of that recent dryness. But really, we're not seeing the development of drought really anywhere across western South Dakota or within the Black Hills. Going out a little bit farther, now this is August, September, and October for temperature. Again, pretty much everything's red. Pretty high confidence, at least in the models, that we're going to see above average temperatures in that August, September, October timeframe. Fall fire season, it can peak for us. We get a lot of more wind events in the fall. And our vegetation, of course, is going through its dry down, its annual dry down as we approach the fall months. Similar precipitation graph, not a strong signal one way or the other. Some hints over in the probabilistic forecast of maybe above average precipitation late summer, early fall, but I wouldn't bet the farm on that by any means. And here's our overall August, September, October outlook from the CPC. Not too different from the July, August, September outlook that we saw a few slides previous. Here's the National Interagency Fire Center's significant wildland fire potential outlook for June. And of course, this was issued on June 1, and they're really highlighting kind of the upper Midwest and the Great Lakes states. And we're seeing kind of above average conditions up there. It's been really dry. I know there's some severity resources up in Minnesota, up in Michigan. They're dry. They're seeing pretty significant drought. And June's not normally a big fire month for them. So this is pretty substantial. It's above normal, and we're all kind of keeping our eyes on it. And then kind of the interior parts of Washington and Oregon. And of course, below normal wildfire potential across California and much of the Four Corners region. Here's our July outlook. Pacific Northwest gets a little bit warmer. Eastern Alaska warms up. And again, the Northeast and upper Midwest Great Lakes states are showing above normal significant fire potential. Much of the same for August for this general region and September. Now the Great Lakes states kind of get out of it, but the Pacific Northwest is still kind of showing those above normal potential for wildfire outlook. So although we have pretty normal fire potential here across South Dakota and Black Hills, there might be some opportunity to get out of region, do severity or get on some fires in these other regions that may have more impactful fire weather conditions than what we are seeing. I do want to contrast this to last year. So this was last year's significant fire potential outlook. This is what was issued on April 1st. Looking at June of 2022 and July of 22, again, this is last year. This was a map produced on April 1st. Look at this. High or significant fire potential across much of the Great Plains and Northern Rockies in July of 2022. And we can look back now this year to July of 22 and say, man, there was nothing going on in July of last year, right? There was just no fire activity like anywhere within this region. So, take these outlooks with a little bit of grain of salt. It's not gospel by any means, but we're, trying to use some state-of-the-art knowledge, the best science that we can to predict what we're going to see. But of course, we're still trying to predict the future here. It's not a settled science. It's still a difficult thing to do. Interesting trends. The blue on here represents La Nina conditions, and the red represents El Nino conditions. I want to point out that the past 3 years, we've been a very strong La Nina. But we're coming out of that. As a matter of fact, we are going into a very strong El Nino. All signs, and these are 3-month bins, so it's March May, June, July, August, September. All of the models are showing us persisting in an El Nino scenario through the summer and through the winter months this year. Potentially a record-setting El Nino. Very, very warm ocean waters in the eastern equatorial Pacific. This can impact the overall subtropical and even polar jet stream, which will impact or can impact the weather in South Dakota. And so if we look at, and I'll come back to that in a second, if we look at temperature anomalies, which you see over here on the left for the summer months, typically we see cooler than average conditions, which are the blues, cooler than average conditions during El Nino years. But the trend over the past 40 to 50 years has been too warm across the western United States. So if we look at a composite a composite plus a trend, so basically looking at what are El Nino plus overall warming trends, it's typically we're warming. So what I'm trying to get at is that El Nino conditions what I'm getting at is that El Nino conditions really are more likely to warm the western part of the United States, and there's not too much of an impact on South Dakota. And so I'm very curious to see what the strong El Nino this year is going to do, because it has the potential to be record-setting. And I'm going to go back to the previous chart, and this is the global sea surface temperatures. So this is from 60 degrees south to 60 degrees north across the entire globe. And this black line up here is this year. We're showing record high sea surface temperatures everywhere on the planet. And so how is that going to impact our weather here in South Dakota? Well, we're in territory we've never seen before, so we're not exactly sure. But Mother Nature's unhappy, the globe is a little bit too warm, and we are seeing record high temperatures across the entire planet. So what's my overall outlook summary? And this again goes through June through August and even into September and October. We're going to see some near-term relief, at least in western South Dakota, with the rains that we have been getting. But overall, I think we're going to see average large fire potential. There are some hints for average precipitation, some hints for above-average temperatures. I really think that's going to kind of push us towards just average fire year. And really, an average fire year for South Dakota is no fire year at all. We either have fires or we don't. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out with these kind of very warm conditions we're seeing across the oceans and the airs worldwide. But again, I do want to stress that there is a signal for near average precipitation across western South Dakota, a signal for warmer than average conditions across western South Dakota. And just remember that the drivers of climate, or the climate drivers for wildfire change throughout the season. That's why I issue those monthly outlooks. And so pay attention to the monthly outlooks as they come out. And hopefully you'll see any changes reflected in those outlooks at the start of every month. So that's about all I have for you today. And if you have questions or comments, feel free to reach out and contact me directly. Thank you for listening.